Well, here we are. We are finally at the end. Technically, we were at the end of the last movie when we did Phantasm 4 Oblivion. This is Phantasm Ravager. Um, some call it Phantasm 5 Ravager, some just call it Phantasm Ravager, and there's a good reason behind it. And we're going to go into that reason pretty soon. But first, huh? Look at that. It's not in my hand anymore. I know, it's still just floating there on the string. Oh well.
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
So, Phantasm Ravager. I'm not scripting this one because if I did, it would sound scripted. And this is an interesting movie to talk about. And I kind of just want to talk about my feelings watching it. This is the first time I've watched it. I wanted to go through the other four before I watched this back when I bought it in 2016 when it came out, because it was a direct to digital release that came out at the same time the remastered first movie came out, and I just got the whole series and decided I was going to watch them all, and I haven't done it until now. So let me begin by saying this movie looks different than any other Phantasm movie, and that's mainly because of David Hartman taking over as director. Now, David Hartman has been a longtime worker and collaborator with Don Coscarelli, and they both wrote this movie together. And I hesitate on movie because I'm about to get into that. Everyone was done with Phantasm as a movie series. Phantasm 4 was the end. Don Coscarelli had moved on to do other movies like Bubba Hotep and John Dies at the End. And Hartman worked with him on those movies. And he just kept shooting these little, like 5-minute films, short films, and he kept showing them to Don Coscarelli. Don. I'm just going to call him Don. We're on first name basis now. And a few times, I mean, most of the time, Don is like, yeah, I really like that, because it was like little 5-minute films that ended up to be something, some kind of fun gore effect at the end. And then he started asking him, he asked Don, you want to do like little Phantasm shorts? And of course, Don Coscarelli loved the idea and he wanted to do it. So he ended up getting together with Hartman, and they started making these little short films, these tiny little vignettes of the adventures of Reggie. It was supposed to originally, allegedly called Two-Fisted Tales with Reggie. I was going to say Reggie Bannister, but that's the actor's name. That's not the character's name. But it was supposed to be like, we're gonna do like a Monster of the Week type of thing, little short films, and they were gonna make them like little webisodes. Or he even said, why don't you do it for, you could put it on the remastered DVD, that kind of thing. Don Coscarelli loved the idea, so they started making these. They got a few done, and when they got a few done, they decided, why not use this and continue on and make Phantasm 5. So they did. They got together, Hartman, Coscarelli, and Reggie Bannister all got together and wrote this story. That was mostly a lot shot. Not mostly. There was just a bit that was already shot, and they tried to put it together into this interesting movie. And that's why it looks so. It looks too clean to me. It looks like something you would see on, say, like Funny or Die or College Humor. That kind of digital, high resolution quality. It doesn't have a cinematic feel to the film itself, and that's one of the things that hurts it, in my opinion, is that it's it's a continuation of the story. In fact, it starts off almost not where the last movie left off, considering there's 18 years in between Phantasm 4 and Ravager. Everybody's older, but it still starts off back in the desert. And but it's so, it looks too good. Like I was watching this movie going, I just want to put I want to put like a VHS filter on it and have it shake a little, and I don't know, it just it just seemed to bother me. So that's how Phantasm Ravager, or Phantasm 5 Ravager, got made. And while watching this movie, I was very torn. I try to give every movie the benefit of the doubt of something good. And while watching this movie, I couldn't think of anything good. And then I watched the interview with Hartman talking about how he got this made, and how everybody was back. Reggie, Mike, and Jody were back. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so this is like the ultimate fan film. Not realizing that Hartman worked on Oblivion with Coscarelli, but it just felt like, it was his chance to take the reins. It was actually at Don's request to have him direct it without him knowing. And seeing their interviews, seeing that they, just went out to make this movie, and it took so long, from 2008, and didn't get released to 2016, and it was very hidden. It was a very hidden movie. It was a secretly made movie. And well, let's get into it. It begins 18 years later, as Reggie's still in the desert, still in his ice cream uniform, still has his 4-barrel shotgun, and he's walking, and another voiceover is happening, like in the last movie, catching you up, since it's been 18 years since Phantasm 4.
He has the power to channel time, dimensions, even dreams. He was a scientist in a past life who crossed the threshold to a red world and came back changed. His sentinels, the brain-sucking spheres, have blocked every path I've had at finding my lost friend Mike. The bastards are toying with me. I know they're here now, somewhere, clocking me. This tall man, he's taken everything from me. My job, my best friend Jody, and now his little brother Mike, who I swore to protect. It's just me now. My name is Reggie.
And he seemed to have lost the Cuda, his car, his Hemi Cuda. And so he's just walking down the street, and lo and behold, he starts getting honked at by someone in a Cuda. And it was this nerdy looking dude, and I was watching this movie going, who the heck is this guy to steal Reggie's car? And what made that cool, like, this movie's just about insider stuff. It was a guy who wrote a really good review about Phantasm 3 in Fangoria, and he got invited to steal Reggie's car. And that's when the spheres come back, and they are full CG now. Another problem I have with this movie, even though it's got some really good blood effects and makeup effects by Gigi Bannister, by the way, that's Reggie's wife, there is a lot of unnecessary CG. I know it's cheap. It's easier to do on digital without it making it look like it was a digital add-on to the film, but I have a real problem with CG wounds, CG muzzle flares from guns. But I'm a practical purist. I don't have a problem with CG. In fact, The Devil's Rejects is one of my absolute favorite movies, and all of the gunshots and stab wounds and all that was done with CG just because it was quicker and cheaper. And you can't fault someone for doing that, especially when they don't have a lot of money to make a movie. But it just sticks in my craw. I don't know where my craw is, but that's where it gets stuck. So these CG spheres, two of them, come after the car after Reggie kicks the guy out who stole the car, stole his clothes, which was Reggie's clothes. It was strange. So he's standing there in his bikini briefs, not even regular briefs. I mean, they're like the European cut bikini briefs, and he gets sphered in the back of the head, and the only one in the movie that, or in the series, that I've ever gotten a sphere to the back of the head is the tall man, and not one of his sentinel spheres. It was the Jody, or not Jody, it was Michael's sphere that he made in Oblivion. So he is the first victim ever to have a sphere in the back of the head. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. The Fangoria guy got to not only get killed, but he got to do a scene with Reggie. He got to get killed by a sphere, and in an original fashion. So all right, I've been trying to talk about these spheres and Reggie. The spheres charge after Reggie after taking the guy out, and it turns into a car chase. But it's a car chase between Reggie's Cuda and two Sentinel spheres. And it's a literal car chase. Like, the spheres are like bumping up against the car, and he's trying to dodge it. And it's a strange scene. It's like you don't know the mass of these spheres, but you know the size of them. I mean, they're this big, and they're bashing into the car, and it's doing weird things, and I don't know. One gets in the car and tries to keep going, of course, keeps going for Reggie, and Reggie coaxes it into the glove compartment and pulls out his gun, and he shoots it. As we keep going, Reggie then sees this woman. Of course, it's Reggie seeing a woman in trouble with a car again. So he pulls over and asks if he could help her, and she says she's waiting for her friend who drives a car like his. That was the only connection I could see between her and this weird guy that was driving a car. But later on, it could be someone else, because this movie is a convoluted movie of other worlds and alternate dimensions. It is. Anyway, he says he can't help fix a car, but he can drive her to wherever she needs to go, and she doesn't trust him, and he's like, my name's Reggie, I'm no longer a stranger, and she introduces herself as Dawn, and she ends up taking him back to her farmhouse, which is just her and her stable hand, Demeter. His name is Demeter, not Demile, but Demeter. Anyway, Dawn and Demeter. They're not together. They just have the same first initial. In fact, you don't see him till later on. But that night, he's telling her the story of the tall man, and how on the whole thing that's gone on, and how he spent most of his life, most of his adult life, fighting him off and trying to search for his friends. And at first, she's kind of, that's a crazy story, but all of a sudden, snap, she believes him. He tries his tiniest bit to put some of the Reggie charm on, but instead he's like, I'm going to write you a song. So she goes upstairs and goes to bed, and he stays on the couch to write a song. She hears him singing, and she looks at the side of her bed and sees that it's empty, and comes down to invite him. By the time she does that, he's sound asleep. And what's cool is she puts a quilt on him, and it's the same quilt that was at the end of the first Phantasm movie. It's not like canon wise; it's a set piece that they used. He then starts dreaming. Reggie does, not Dawn, because I said he. This recording live without a script is it's not as easy as it looks. Although I am looking to the camera more because I don't have to look over here. Every so often I check my screen, and that's it. But he has this dream. He wakes up in a old folks home, which is it's very Bubba Hotep. It's almost like because they work together on Bubba Hotep, they're like, oh, let's just use some of these sets. But he wakes up in an old folks home, like a really rundown one, like the one in Bubba Hotep. If you haven't seen Bubba Hotep, by the way, it's a damn good movie, especially if you love Bruce Campbell and Ozzie Davis as JFK. But that's a different movie. As he wakes up, he looks, and the bed next to him is taken by a very old, feeble Angus Scrimm. This was his last movie. He did get to see it before he passed, and but this was one of the last scenes that he got to shoot, and it kind of shows he's really old, really feeble, and he looks over at Reggie. He's like, "You're new. I haven't seen you before." He's like, "My name is Jebediah. What's yours?" He says Reggie. And Reggie's still freaked out because he's looking at the tall man. The dream goes on, it gets weird. He wakes up, he's looking outside, and it's a beautiful day. He sees Demeter walking off, and he's like, oh, that must be the Demeter guy. And he calls for Dawn. He's like, Dawn, are you awake? He hears rustling upstairs, and he's like, and he thinks something's wrong. I'm looking down at my screen again, I'm sorry. He thinks there's something wrong. So he starts walking up, and he hears more rustling and then drilling. He opens up the door, and there's a sphere stuck in Dawn's forehead, Phantasm style, like that. And just blood is gushing. I mean, she's covered in blood. The bed is covered in blood. It's a good shot of a blood-soaked bed, like I don't know, it's just little things like the sheets were rippled, so there was pools, and it didn't look cheap. It was a really good horrific horror scene. He gets out of the house and starts arming up, and he opens the Cuda, and all of these weapons. In fact, a lot of the weapons were kind of throwbacks, like the guns that they've had since the first, and second, and third, and fourth movies that you've seen and stuff. He finds the chainsaw. He loads his 4-barrel shotgun. He grabs a pair of nunchucks to signify Rocky. The whole time I was going, get a frisbee. Come on, the frisbee. Get the frisbee. There was no frisbee. It's like Tim the Kid from 3 just does not exist. Like when he was pulled in from the end of part 3, he was erased from existence because Tim is just gone, and all memories of him is gone. And heads to the barn. He closes the door, and Demeter's there, and he's speaking whatever language that he speaks. Reggie can't understand him, but he sees that he has his gun in his hand, so he puts down all of his weapons, and Demeter's still mad at him. He's got an axe, and you hear a sphere going around outside, and then you hear it go after a horse. Yes, a horse. And it doesn't show in detail, but it does show the sphere taking out the horse. And I don't call myself an animal lover, but you don't kill animals in movies. And it kind of bothered me, but I'm glad that it didn't show as much as it could. It's not a dog. If it was a dog, I would have stopped the movie and not even done this review. But it was a horse, and it was quick. It was done quickly, so no harm, no foul.
Dude, bad news about your horse.
The horse is fine. The real horse is just absolutely fine. And now we get to one of the other worlds. This is what kind of makes the movie a little bit convoluted. Back at the old folks' home world, Reggie wakes up being walked in the park in a wheelchair, and he looks up, and it's Michael. and they get to a table and they start talking. And Reggie talks about, what's going on. He's still confused. He still thinks that Michael's should be dead, and he's gone. And this Michael has only heard the stories from Reggie, and he doesn't know anything. And in this world, Reggie has early onset dementia, and Michael humors him by asking him about the stories, not out of ridicule or anything, but he out of being his friend. So he keeps talking about the tall man, and Michael listens to him. In fact, Michael starts talking about how he's been reading about parallel worlds and parallel dimensions, and how maybe they're not even parallel, they're all like smushed together in a sphere that it's constantly going at the same time, or a sphere analogy. So Michael's not being condescending about his stories. He's actually listening to them and maybe even kind of believing it a bit. Okay, so then we go back to the Reggie who has just escaped the barn, and he's in the woods looking out for bad guys and stuff, and he comes upon this dimensional fork in the middle of the woods, and he just stands there, and he looks behind him, and there's a gigantic sentinel sphere, like Death Star size, just hovering behind him. And at the same time, Dementia Reggie hears a noise, gets out of his wheelchair, and walks towards the noise, and it's a dimensional fork. So both Barn Reggie and Dementia Reggie walk into the fork, and Barn Reggie ends up in this stark white room like you see in the first two Phantasm movies, and he has an encounter with the tall man who's just standing there. The tall man is trying to convince Reggie that Reggie doesn't really matter, but the tall man is confused by Reggie's plight. He wants his friends back, and tall man asks him throughout the whole movie, "Why do you want your friends back?" He's like, "Loyalty." He's, your loyalty is a man-made thing. And he just talks about weird stuff. He talks the way the tall man does. But this time the tall man tries to make him a deal. He tells him that since he has control over life and death, he can bring his family back. After Reggie uses his family as why he's constantly going after the tall man. He's like, you blew up my family, basically, in the second movie. He didn't say in the second movie because that would be really meta. But the tall man's like, "I'll bring him back if you leave me alone." And Reggie's having none of that. So after Reggie denies him, he starts walking backwards towards the fork, and he is transported to a mausoleum. And I believe this is the mausoleum from the first movie. And he sees someone that we haven't seen in a long, long time, and that is the Lady in Lavender, once again played by Kathy Lester. And she's still in the lavender dress, and she comes floating towards Reggie, not like princess style, but she's floating, and she has one toenail that's scraping and just causing a rift in the floor. And at first Reggie doesn't recognize her, and then he starts having flashbacks of her at the end of the first one as he's trying to save her, and then he remembers her stabbing him in the stomach as he tries to save her. Her face gets all demonic, and he shoots her in the head, and she falls over, and there's yellow and red blood. After killing her, he looks where she came from, and there's this black void portal looking thing. So he goes through it. Why not? You're in a mausoleum. Why don't you just go into a black void hole? He walks in, and it's a cave. And then he walks to this cave, and he encounters the tall man again, and the cave breaks away, and they're on this like rock pedestal, and there's lightning and clouds and shit going everywhere, and he is like just done dealing with with Reggie, and he's just like, one last time, have you considered my offer? And he's like, no, I want Mike and Jody back. And he goes, why? Like, he's just so pissed off, and he keeps talking about how loyal he is. The tall man just doesn't give a shit. And then the tall man gives Reggie basically a scientific description of humans.
Your kind are simply skin sacks of water and meat. And when a few random electrons fire off in that puny brain of yours, you're ready to annihilate yourself for this feeble sensation you call loyalty.
Then it switches to another Reggie, or it could be the same Reggie. But he wakes up in this morgue, strapped to a table next to a body that's been, the head has just been split open by a sentinel sphere, and the door opens up, and you see this little figure walk around, and it's wearing goggles and a gas mask. And then a taller figure comes and walks around wearing goggles and a gas mask. And you're thinking it's either a lurker or a graver, or it's a lurker with a graver, or it's a lurker that is now a graver. You think it's something bad. The little guy, was it the little one? No, it was the taller person. Pulls out a knife, takes it down to Reggie's head, and cuts the straps, and starts cutting the straps and lets them out. And then the little dude takes his goggles off and hood and stuff, and it's this little person. You find out his name is Chunk, and the taller person takes off their stuff, and it's Dawn, but it's not really Dawn. It's a Dawn from a different universe. It's not even her name. I think she said her name was Sarah. And Reggie's super confused because he's like, oh, I saw you die, you're dead. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, I stayed at your house and I wrote you a song. And he started singing lyrics, and they think he's crazy, but he was their mission. So they take him, and they get him into this hallway, and it's this just old rundown hospital. Everything's boarded up and everything. And they run into another group of people dressed like them. They're holding guns to Reggie, and Reggie's like, whoa, wait a minute. But, I'm with them, and he puts his gun down, and the main guy pointing the gun at him put his gun down. He takes his stuff off, and it's Michael. And this Michael is the freedom fighter Michael. This is to be believed the Michael from the last movie that had the hole in his head. Later on, he talks about how he got up and started walking and looking for what happened since they blew up the tall man's hearse. And it shows a really gross scene of him going into this house, this rundown house, and he goes into the bathroom and finds a needle in this bathroom, and like some old hair, and he starts sewing up his sphere wound. But they run into the tall man and his minions, his gravers, and so on and so forth. And we haven't had an explosion yet, so why not use an RPG in the middle of a hallway? So they do that, and blows them up, and they run off, and Michael starts telling Reggie, this is not the world you know. You've been in a coma for so many years. Or he didn't say a coma, he said on ice. So he's been, I don't know, he hasn't been suspended. He's an older man. But apparently they spent a long time looking for Reggie, which is really kind of cute, because it's usually Reggie that's searching for Michael. He's like, I'm just ready to get out of here. And he's like, this world is not the world is not our world anymore. It's his world. And he opens up the door, and there's this cool scene, like it's just all red outside, and everything's destroyed, and these giant spheres are firing lasers into the ground, and that's where like all the budget went was for these scenes. But it shows that the tall man had won in this world. He used this alien virus that infect people really fast, and when they get to the height of their infection, their heads explode. Then he can take the dead bodies and make them into his thralls, and so on and so forth. And he's taken over the world, and these giant spheres aren't helping at all. So as they're talking, and they find out that the woman's been taken. Sarah, I think her name is. I'm not looking it up. I'm just talking. The one that's not Dawn. And they run into the room where Chunk told them, or where Chunk was, and he's not there anymore. And there's a dimensional fork, and they put on these gas masks, and not gas masks. It's more of just, it's like a respirator, because they know they have to go into the tall man's world, the red world where the squishy guy came from in the second one. So they cross over, and they get to this giant canyon. This is just huge gap, like just a mile apart, and they have this shouting match at each other. The tall man has his army, and he has the girl restrained, and you see that Chunk is one of the lurkers. He hasn't been turned into one. He's pretending to be one, and the tall man doesn't notice. But during this time, they have a banter about each other, and the tall man is like, "Well, you're in my world." He didn't say it like that. "Well, you're in my world." He's like, "You're in my world. You can kill me if you want, but I can come back." And then it shows this matrix scene of thousands of tall men, and he's like, "There are thousands of me. There are tens of thousands of me from tens of thousands of different dimensions that you can't even imagine." As you know, from the rest of the movies, he just keeps coming back. He's basically replicating himself from an infinite amount of parallel worlds. He pretty much thinks he's invincible. Not invincible, but he's unbeatable. And he even gets cocky enough to pull out the sphere that was in Michael's head and sends it over to him to try to take Michael over. And you think he does. He comes over, he looks at it, and his eyes chrome over like they did in the third movie. And then the sphere goes away, and that upsets the tall man, and he breaks the woman's neck. And at that time, Chunk starts killing lurkers left and right, just throwing knives at them. And he throws a knife at one of the gravers and goes right through his head. And he's a little badass. He's just a little person. He's just a total badass. He tells them to run. As soon as he takes off his lurker thing, and he's just a bandolier of grenades, and he pulls the pins and runs towards the tall man. And that's the end of Chunk, appropriately named. Then it goes to Reggie outside. He looks over to a tree. It kind of just like opens up to the post-apocalyptic, tall man win world. And Michael's standing there with the quad-barreled shotgun. And he gets up and starts walking towards him, and a doctor and two nurses notice him just walking on off after the doctor's like, "How'd he get down here?" And the doctor actually pulls out a needle and starts walking towards him. And Dimensional Rift Michael throws the shotgun to Reggie, and Reggie catches it. And when he catches it, it's one of those shots where it switches to a different dimension, and he turns around, and the doctor and two nurses are now gravers in this post-apocalyptic world, and he kills them with one shot because it's a 4-barrel shotgun. He just shot them. They were just close enough together to shoot them all. And they're fighting gravers and well, just Gravers. Lurkers are not involved. The Gravers are there, and Michael's also being a badass with a gun. He's shooting. He's pistol whipping. He's doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And they get into this alleyway, and they they need a ride out. And guess what happens? That's right. The CUDA comes back. The CUDA is back, and it's got dual miniguns on it. It's covered in mesh and razor wire. And they open up the door, and inside driving it is
Jody?
How's it hanging, Reg?
and he's still Jody. He's real Jody, not possessed thrall Jody. So they get in the car and then they drive off. At that point, Reggie gets really tired and he starts almost like napping. And it cuts back to another Reggie, which I guess was Dementia Reggie, or I don't know, but he's lying in bed taking his final breaths, and Jody and Michael are by his side holding his hands. After watching the scene again and editing it and watching it again and editing it and watching it again, I've realized that it is Reggie's death of the imaginary world and the birth of a full Reggie in the real post-apocalyptic hellscape world that is the actual reality. I didn't realize that before, but I do now. So there it is. There's what I think of it. It's a sad scene. I missed it up a little bit, but because of the quality of the film, it wasn't as hard hitting. If it was an actual, visceral film, I probably would have hit me harder, because Reggie's like the most badass character in horror. Sorry, Ash. Reggie's got the win for this one. Speaking of Ash, a little side note here. One of the original screenwriters for this movie was way back guy who worked for Quentin Tarantino way back in the 90s, and he wrote a screenplay that got approval from Don Coscarelli called Phantasm 1999. It was supposed to be the last Phantasm movie, and he even had Bruce Campbell ready to play in it. I don't know if he was going to play as Ash. I doubt it, but that would have been cool to have Bruce Campbell and Reggie Bannister together, because they're like the two coolest characters or character actors for these types of movies. Anyway, so that Reggie passes, and then it goes back to Reggie, Jody, and Michael in the car driving away. He asks, "What do we do next? What's our next step?" And Michael's like, "We're going to fight harder. We're going to fight faster. We're going to go north where it's cold, where it's really cold," because they found out in Phantasm 3, yes, 2, 3, it was 3, that the tall man doesn't do well with the cold, and so they think that's a more of a advantage that they get. So they're banding together no matter what, and they drive off, and the credits start. This is a very short movie. It's the shortest of the Phantasm movies. I think it's 86 minutes long. But now that it's really popular nowadays, but it really wasn't in 2016. There's a mid-credit scene, really cool mid-credit scene where I actually kind of like jump up and yelled, "Yay!" So this mid-credit sequence, you see footsteps and a shotgun walking towards a dimensional fork. At the same time, the dimensional fork shoots out Chunk, and he's pretty chunked. He's missing an arm, not missing. It's like half blown off, and he's just covered in charred skin. And I mean, he's alive and still his good old self. But the figure walking up to him, it kind of pans up, and it's another person covered in the goggles and the hood and the face stuff. So it takes it off, and it is Rocky from Phantasm 3, the badass nunchuck carrying Grace Jones looking chick. And she's got her nunchucks actually in her coat. You can see it when she's talking before you realize that it's her. the CUDA pulls up, and Rocky and Chunk get in, and they drive off, and then we get the real credits. And now, when you ask someone about a movie they didn't like, and they say, "What's your favorite part about the movie?" and they're usually like, "The credits," or "the end credits." I've only said this about one movie, uh, and it was Iron Man 3. And I didn't hate the movie. Not a very good movie in my opinion. I love Shane Black. I love his snappy dialogue. I just didn't think it was a very good Iron Man movie. And I bring this up because my favorite part about the movie was the credits, because it was they were cool, slip. They were cool and slick, and the song was great. The animations were great, and it was just the coolest part of the whole movie. And I have to say that the end credits for Phantasm Ravager are the same. It's the credits are rolling, they're white, but in the background it's all red, and it's scenes of them fighting, scenes of people fighting. Usually, mostly it's Michael, Reggie, Chunk, and Rocky, but they're all either deleted scenes or random scenes that that they shot in Hartman's backyard, of against the green screen of them just doing random stuff that he put effects into it. And it's cool because you can barely see what's going on, because it's red on black. It's like you're watching a movie made on a Virtual Boy. But it's cool stuff. Like there's a cool shot of one of the giant spheres, taking out a car on the highway and just blowing things up. And there's Michael shooting an RPG at one of the spheres in the snow. But it's really cool. And at the same time, there's this song. First, I thought it was just an update and kind of remix of the Phantasm theme, and then it has lyrics. It was a rap song. It was a cool rap song about Reggie. It's actually called the Reggie Rap, and it was really well done. And I was having a good time with these credits. And that is Phantasm Ravager, and that's the end of the Phantasm series. When I started this journey, I had seen the majority of Phantasm movies, but going through them again in order, all at the same time within a month, I've become a big fan. I mean, I've gotten my orbs. I have pins now. I just got the first the 1979 score on record. I really embraced Phantasm as a staying horror franchise, and sadly, it's overlooked over slashers and stuff, but it does have its fans, and I highly recommend all of the movies. I don't recommend them as much as I would other things, but the first movie, it's so visceral, so psychological, so spooky, and I hate the word spooky. It's come out in this world now that it's just doesn't have the meaning that it should, but it's literally spooky. It's legitimately spooky. The second one, it was a subpar sequel, but that was due to the studio. And Coscarelli did what he could with what he was given. Even though they replaced Michael, they did a good job. The third one was kooky. It was insane. Like I said in my review, it was like Tobe Hooper did with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He took this serious world that he created and showed a more wacky, almost Looney Tunes side to it, but it still fit within that world. And 4 was my second favorite movie. Oblivion could have been the end of the story, and this one, for what it was, for it being starting out as a web series, a proposed web series, and then it became a movie. It's actually loved by the fans, and it'll probably grow on me more. I didn't dislike it. They're just little things that got to me about it. What I'm saying is, Phantasm 5 Ravager, or Phantasm Ravager, whatever you want to call it, it's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie, but it's a good part of the Phantasm universe, and I would like to see more. I'm glad we're lucky enough to get 5 movies, almost all of it done by the original actors and the original director. It's done, and that's my countdown to Halloween. So I hope you guys have a fun Halloween. I know it's tough and these trying times. I hate hearing that all. It's commercial now. These trying times, but everybody have a safe Halloween. Thank you for sticking with me on these reviews. Even though October's done, I still have a few uh, horror videos that I want to do in this manner. I'm also going back to doing the text reviews. But thanks again for sticking with me. Remember to check us out. Like, subscribe, and comment, follow, whatever it is you do. I don't know the lingo still. Follow our podcast, Cinemadness podcast. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. Go to our website. It's www.cinemadnesspodcast.com, where you can find our text reviews and our actual episodes and stuff. Also, we're on social media, so give us a watch, give us a look, and I'll see you next time. I have a hankering to do a review. Thanks again for sticking with me through Phantasm, and have a phantasmic day. Boy. Can I cut? Can I? There's still no one here. Oh, there it is.